Hello and welcome back to Teachable Future. Today joining me is the amazing Jangles Science Lad, or otherwise known as SJW Debates. That'll be on YouTube and Twitter. Jangles here is a online left-wing content creator, debater, and all-round clever person. Jangles, hello.
Hello, how you doing, Hugh?
I'm amazing, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good today. So,
Great.
smack dab middle of the workday. It's a nice little break. So,
excited
for some interesting conversations.
As am I. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. Just for the viewers here, would you like to describe, what it is that you do, and what is sort of your, I guess your general aura around your amazing channel, Jangles Science Lad.
Okay, so a few years ago, I think I was in a lot of people's shoes, and I was frustrated about what was going on, especially in the political sphere. But I wasn't super involved in any way. I wasn't, didn't have a job. I didn't have a job that was related to politics. I did have a job, but it was a personal training, and so nothing where I could feel like I was making an impact in the world as a whole. Not to say that was, I'm getting off track here, but I felt a little kind of helpless, and I felt really frustrated that that all these bad things were going on. There was nothing that I could personally do. And then I thought, well, there is stuff you can do. I can get online and I can fight with strangers and get really mad about everything, and that's somehow going to help things. That's going to make the world a better place. But if I'm just mad enough online, the world will get better. So one night at around 2 a.m., I decided to make a Twitter account.
The perfect time.
Actually, yeah, perfect time. And that 2 a.m. Twitter account, after a few bourbons, is why you have why we see the name SJW Debates is my Twitter handle. So I'm stuck with that, which is fine.
It's quite funny.
Yeah. Well, and part of the reason I said that was because, especially around that time, this was about in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't a whole lot of left-wing debaters out there, so all of the the quote-unquote discourse was mostly, at least my conception of it, was right-wingers dunking on feminists via video responses. There wasn't a whole lot of dialogue, but the people who were seen as I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm the big bad smart debatey boy, we're just dunking on feminists. So I didn't see a whole lot of that coming from the left. I realize now that existed, it just wasn't as big as it is now. So I wanted to step in and I will be the social justice warrior, whomst is also a debater. So,
and as you pointed out there, I think around 2016 and 2018, I think it's actually 2016. The online political sphere was very much dominated by right-leaning voices. The battle of ideas, as some might say, or the marketplace of ideas, was very much dominated by these right-leaning voices. Your Sargons, your Shapiros, your Petersons, your Rubens. But then now recently, or I guess in the last year, probably the last year, there's been a bit of a resurgence of of leftist voices. Being like yourself, or people I guess Vosh, for example, who are much more aggressive in engaging with opponents in this discourse. What do you think has led to this sort of increased presence of left-wing voices in this sphere, to the point where you see a lot of people like Sargon running from any sort of debate engagement?
I think a huge part of it was seeing someone do it and succeed at it. I honestly think that's Destiny, for all his faults, he definitely broke that barrier. He showed this, it wasn't just that our ideas were good and data backed them up, is that we can communicate them effectively. And then if you actually are, force someone who has, had this echo chamber for the longest time, who's only been doing video responses, but who considers himself this master of discourse and this, logic and reason bro, to actually force them to, uphold their ideas and explain their ideas in real time, a lot of them just aren't very good at it, because it turns out their reasoning only goes skin deep. And they do, they haven't thought out their positions very well at all. And being able to, from a rhetorical standpoint, just challenge them on their ideas one level deeper than they're used to, and they often just fall apart. And so once we realize that actually our ideas are good, the data does back it up, and we can be good enough rhetoricians and good enough speakers to engage with them. Well, now you see a resurgence of, I don't even see a resurgence, just an influx of lefty online creators who decide that I'm going to go into these spaces. I'm going to go into right-wing circles or challenge right-wing voices, and I'm going to make them defend their ideas on their own merits. And I think we're doing a pretty good job coming out on top most of the time.
So how important do you think it is to be represented in this online discourse? A lot of time people will talk about online politics versus real life politics. How important was it to fill a vacuum of left-wing voices in the online political sphere?
I think as we go forward, the disconnect between online politics and real politics is going to get, thinner and thinner, because especially, I mean, who isn't online these days, especially since most of us are being forced to be online for the past couple of months, and we're developing habits that are just going to continue to go on. And how much, how important is like Twitter for the marketplace of ideas, especially with our president making that his primary avenue of communicating with the public. So I think as time goes on, there's just going to be less of this hard barrier between quote unquote online politics and real politics, just because that's how you can get out this giant message to a bunch of people at once. And so I think getting in on it now and setting up a good what am I trying to say, like a good ethos, a good I'm struggling to think of the word. A good
environment, culture.
Culture. There we go.
Yeah,
a good environment, a good culture of we are willing to defend our ideas because we think they're good. I think that's important, because a few years ago, it didn't seem, and again, this is just my perception, it didn't seem like a lot of left-wing creators, a lot of the quote-unquote social justice warriors were willing to do that, because to give these ideas the time of day is to legitimize them in and of themselves, and I don't think I believe with that description.
So, what do you think is necessary for, as you said, the line between an online politics world and a real world politics world, I guess, is blurring more and more every day. But what do you think is going to be necessary for an online left, for example, to really break into policy, change? I think there's a lot of elements of online political discourse which don't really work in real life, whether it be an overt aggressiveness or like a gatekeeping style, these sort of issues. What do you think will be necessary for an online leftist sphere to start or to really translate into real world success?
A recognition that even though that line is blurred between online and real world discourse, that with online discourse, not unlike real world discourse, the people who you surround yourself with are not representative of the broader public that we're trying to reach. So even though you can have thousands of followers and interact with literally hundreds of people every day, or thousands, or even tens of thousands, if enough people like your tweets, that's still a very insular community, and it's not representative of the broader people who you need to actually convince. Something that is really tough is if you want to enact change, preaching to the choir, getting tens of thousands of likes isn't going to do it. You're not going to, you need to convince people who already don't think like you, and that requires going into spaces that are hostile, if not outright hostile, just not immediately receptive to what you're saying. So it requires going out, maybe even into the real world, going out into real events, going into those so for example, I went to not MythCon, but it was run by the same guys, called the Better Discourse Conference. I got a lot of pushback from that because that's a right-wing event, but that's exactly the places we need to go, because that's a quote-unquote real world event where you're interacting with real people. And that's important for legitimizing our ideas. It's important for optics, for lack of a better word. Optics are important. How people perceive your ideas is as or more important than the ideas themselves. So it's just being more aware of how the public thinks outside of our close-knit community, and being able to identify with those ideas rather than just immediately discrediting or demonizing people for not being as woke as we are.
So what do you think your average political content consumer, or your average keyboard warrior, can do to start to lead to this positive change in the real world? I think a lot of questions that I see left-wing content creators, a lot of questions they receive are things like, oh, how can I get involved? How can I start to support, these sorts of movements without just arguing with people on Twitter? What do you think that, just the average person who doesn't have a massive platform or, loads of resources can do to really start to try and make a change in politics?
I think first what you have to do, or at least this is what I did, what content do you already enjoy? And really think about what drew you to that content. So if you have a favorite creator or a favorite couple of creators that are politically, politically informed or politically active, what drew you to them? What makes you like them? Are they funny? Do they have a really engaging style? Are they artistic in their video presentations and things like that? And think about less about the content and more about the way it's being delivered. I know that seems like I'm thinking surface level, but no, it's actually the ideas are pretty consistent on left. Income inequality, bad. Racism, bad. Let's fix these things. LGBT rights, these things are good. And just having the correct ideas isn't enough. You have to convey those ideas. And most people unless the people who like dedicate their lives to politics are probably in the minority. Most people have, like I did, like I said at the beginning, they have a quote unquote normal job, and when they're on the internet, when they're on Twitter, they're wasting time. So you have to think like, well, what is someone going to click on that's would entertain them, but also inform them. So part of it has to do with like you got to make something that someone is. You have to make it so someone who isn't already invested in the topic would click on it anyway.
Mm-hmm. So sorry.
Oh no, so because I realized I didn't really answer your question. Just start. Yeah. If you want to get involved, sometimes just being active on Twitter is enough. Engage with people who are vehemently disagree with you and don't treat them like absolute shit. Can I curse on the show?
Go for it. It's fine.
Yeah, so do not treat other people like absolute dog shit if you actually want to make a change and be an activist, because the people who don't agree with you, those are who you're trying to talk to. It's not just supporting the people with the good ideas, it's reaching out to the people with the quote-unquote bad ideas. So, and hey, none of us are going to change the world by ourselves. I mean, as people who are on the left, we kind of this should be like the core principle of our beliefs, right? Like, systems are important. So none of us, just because you're not going to change the world by yourself, that doesn't mean you're not going to play a part. And so just convincing 2 or 3 people to convince to think a different way on Twitter, that's good. If more people did that, we'd be in a better spot. So, and if you want to make content, I'd say go for it. Making content is, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's very easy to get started. It's very easy to cut your teeth on and give it a shot. All you need is a microphone. You don't even need a webcam if you don't want. Like, there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. Think about what you enjoy and then try making it yourself, and then you'll find what you do and don't like, or whether or not this is like this specific avenue is where you want to go down, but there are plenty of avenues.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've got our first hot take of the podcast there for you. Jangles don't treat people like dog shit. So that's a quote if you ask me.
And there's it sounds weird. There's research to support that if you needed that research.
Oh, well.
That people tend to be more receptive to ideas presented by people who aren't being shitty to them. So
classic Jangles, citing all these studies. I'm here talking about the ideas, but we've just got loads of studies, loads of science. Fine, amazing.
Amazing.
Amazing. I can't stop. I watched one Jesse Lee Peterson thing. That's his name, isn't it? And
yes.
I just can't stop myself. It's too fun.
It is amazing. It's amazing. Like,
it's amazing.
It's so fantastic. Unironically, I love it.
It's too much fun. It's just too much fun. The fact that someone with such abhorrent beliefs has such an amazing way of speaking is quite upsetting to me. But
I mean, it should also really highlight how important rhetoric is, how important being entertaining and being likable is. Because try as I might, his ideas are abhorrent. I can't not like Jesse Lee Peterson.
He's somehow a likable person. I don't know how.
Yeah, and that's important. Like, it's really important to come across as likable. So this, you kind of pointed to this earlier, this environment that we've set up, especially on Twitter, where dunking on people and being instantly incredibly aggressive towards people, that's kind of the environment that's on there, and it's not good. It's not, or at least it might be good to make you feel better. It might be good to like release aggression. But let's be honest. How many times have you went in hard and they went in hard, and then you're just fighting back and forth until 3 o'clock in the morning, getting progressively madder and madder, and then the sun's rising and you haven't gotten any sleep and you're just incredibly mad all the next day? I know that's happened to me a shameful amount of times because I am a product of my environment, and I'm not too good to fall into that trap of being shitty to people on Twitter, even though I should know better. So yeah, I mean, think about that. If you want to be an activist, being an activist is not yelling at people who don't agree with you to push them away and make them mad. It's trying to get them to change their minds, and that requires a different thought process than dunking or cheering on your side.
I mean, I think it does remind me of the amazing Michael Brooks quote, which the one I think everyone talks about quite often, which was just be ruthless with systems but be kind to people. And I think that is something that's very important in trying to bring people onto your own side, is to be, I guess I always think it's important to be something I've tried to emphasize in my like tiny videos has been like being welcoming. If someone wants to change their mind, you don't want to go, haha, see, you were wrong. You want to go, oh, good, come join us. We're much better than that. You get rewarded for changing your opinions and then becoming right. I think welcoming is something good for a community to try and build.
Yeah. That's kind of where the discourse is at right now on Twitter, right? Like, should we welcome people who are like quote unquote reformed fascists?
Yeah.
And I can see like, well, they did, they might have caused a lot of harm. They might have been really shitty to all these people. Are we just going to let them get away with that?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, like, well, I mean, do you want revenge, or do you just like,
or do you want
like
results?
being shitty? Yeah, being mad at them right now isn't going to undo all that damage.
Mm-hmm.
Like nothing is going to undo it all. So what if they started doing good instead? Isn't that like, from an objective standpoint, isn't that good? Should we encourage that?
Yeah. Speaking earlier of political content that we find entertaining and want to emulate, you had your recent debate with Milo Yiannopoulos, and it was very interesting. It was on white fragility. The highlight reel is on your channel, Jangles ScienceLad, of course. How do you think that debate went in this conversation? And what was the general feedback? You want to describe to the audience who may not have seen it, how it went, and why it was quite a peculiar one to watch in terms of online debate, especially someone like him.
Peculiar is definitely a way to describe it. So I'm of two minds about it. So that debate happened a little over a month ago. So I've had kind of time to get some really, really good criticism, really good feedback, and to kind of like let the praise die down a little bit. I'm of two minds about it. On one hand, I don't think that I presented the ideas around white fragility. I don't think I presented them super well. And I've definitely took that to heart when I went to the Better Discourse conference, to change up the rhetoric a little bit, to appeal to the audience more, to be simpler, which is something that is overlooked a lot. You should be simple in online debates because I'm a teacher by trade now, so people are only going to listen to about 20% of what you say. So make sure you really hammer home the points, the main ideas that you want them to walk away from. Because even if they forget the specifics, they can remember the feeling that the specifics supported the main point you wanted to make, and that's what they'll walk away from. I don't think I did a great job about that. So if we're talking about the content of the debate, the objective analysis of the debate, I think I could have done better. On the other hand, the world's biggest troll cried about being called buddy and dog. And from that standpoint, I don't think I would have changed a thing.
Yeah, I thought your editing, at least in your like cut up version of the highlights reel, was amazing, where you would show him freaking out because you called him buddy, and then intercut it with a time where he would be, provocative just for the sake of being provocative. It was a strange experience to see someone who like you see so much on like short Twitter clips dunking on people, and you're like, okay, good for you, buddy. But then you see him put in an actual environment where he's challenged directly, and it all falls apart. How much do you think in these sort of debates with like prominent figures like Milo, it is about like breaking through, I guess, a veneer or like almost like a cult of personality with someone who's built themselves up as, the amazing smart logic bro, getting through that and then being able to take apart what they're actually saying rather than just being caught up in a performance piece?
That's the hard part that I still don't have a great answer for, just because it's so individualized. With Milo, so I don't think an example would get more extreme than Milo as someone who is entirely performative. There's very, very little substance behind what he says. Of course, he'll rattle out enough like statistics in order to like give the veneer of someone who knows what they're talking about. But, they're always out of context. They're always rattle off rapid fire so they don't have a chance to be challenged. With Milo, it is all about the performance. And so going up against that person, a fan of Milo is going to be a fan of the performance. They're not going to be there to listen to carefully reasoned arguments with statistics and data and studies behind them. They are there. If they're a fan of Milo, they want to see Milo dunk on an SJW. And that is the kind of mindset that I went in expecting. And so countering that, like taking away like his primary dunking points and being more aggressive than I typically am during debates, threw him off his game to the point where he was this whiny baby crying about civility politics when he had to do it. And this is the best part. He had to whine about civility and come in here for a serious discussion, all the while wearing a Black Cox Matter t-shirt. So he had predicted something very differently. And he couldn't. It's not like he could like change that shirt halfway through the debate, but it came off. It definitely didn't come off sincere. It came off as him trying to backpedal and desperately try to get to be on top again. So
he'd made a hard commitment quite early on. But watching that debate and watching a lot of your other stuff, your style is, I think, is very fitting to your name. Science Lad. It's very I think I saw it quite a lot in your conversation with Sargon of Akkad and V with Papa Burjay, where there's all of this rhetoric flying about. People are saying they're very emotionally charged sentences, and then you sit there and you go, well, can we please talk about the studies and like these facts that I have a massive document on, and like a million of them. How important do you think it is in being able to wrestle down personalities to, hey, I have a million facts and studies. I'm clearly on the right side here. It's like it's taking the Ben Shapiro logic bro thing to its actual, correct conclusion of, rather than just like talking quickly and pretending you're smart, really engaging with I guess the empirical reality of these situations when you talk to them. How difficult is it, or how important do you feel it is in trying to ground these conversations with people in studies and empiricism and research?
I think that, so I'm a big, so the more I do into debates and the more I read up about rhetoric and the more I do ironically, the more I do research on how to talk to people and what people actually care about,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think studies are enough. I don't think being correct is enough to win a debate or to win someone over to your side. So I'm of the belief that reason and logic and data is 1/3 of the picture. So it's not to say that's not important. It's like, if you still want to convince someone, people care about being correct. People care about having the best view of reality and the most coherent view of reality. People definitely care about that, but it's still only part of the picture. The other two parts are your character. Like I was saying earlier, someone has to like you to take you seriously. And I'm definitely guilty of this. If I hear a bunch of like statistics and studies from someone I viscerally dislike, I'm probably not going to believe them, or at least I'm not going to admit that I believe them because I viscerally dislike that person. That's irrational, but hey, I'm a human being with all the flesh and meat. So, and the other part is emotion. So they have to like you. It definitely helps to have the actual data and studies on your side, but also the person who you're talking to has to care about that data.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, I'm doing a lot of research on income inequality. And so people in the United States, they actually know more about the degree of income inequality than you might think, especially given our our belief in meritocracy and people get what they deserve. We actually know quite a bit about how bad income inequality is.
Mm-hmm.
But people don't really care about it for a ton of other reasons that I'm still doing research on. But the gist of it is, well, my view of the world says that we live in a just world. Everybody gets what they deserve. So if there is this giant gap between the highest earners and the lowest earners, well, it must be because that the highest earners deserve it, and so do the lowest earners. So you have to make them care about those statistics more so than just making them aware of them.
Mm-hmm. So I think one thing that we see, after any sort of debate with a prominent, with a prominent leftist and a prominent right-wing person, like your Milos or your Sargons or whatever, there is always a large discourse, whether it be on, Twitter or Discord or whatever, saying about platforming. It's something which is talked about quite heavily in left-wing circles, especially about whether it is worth platforming someone. What is your opinion on the debate around platforming, whether it's more harmful to, present these people and these ideas, or whether it is better to actually engage with them directly, so that one can, try and take them down?
I think it's less a question of whether or not you should do something, and more of a question of what are you good at. So, for example, if you're not good at debate is a skill that speaks nothing towards your intelligence,
Mm-hmm.
your ability to research, your ability to talk to people. Debate is a very specific skill, and if you're not good at debate, you shouldn't do it. You might be really good at writing. You might be really good at video essays. You might be really good at writing. You might be really good at Twitter. Twitter is in of itself like a skill. I actually believe that, like being able to put your thoughts into something short, quippy, to the point with that character limit, that's a skill. But I'm also of the belief that we can win even when the other team shows up. I think that, not everybody's geared this way, but you have to admit that some people are geared this way. We test ideas by putting them up against opposition. And there is a big segment of the population where if they never see these ideas challenged, they're just going to believe them. And that's, that goes both ways. Like, so for example, like I think it's pretty safe to say that most of us, especially if we grew up in United States or Britain or something like that, we think that racism is bad. We grew up being told that racism is bad, but did we ever really like have the practice of
Mm-hmm.
defending why racism is bad? Or was it just like this loose idea that we had? And so the minute someone comes in and challenges it for the first time, you might be like, oh, I've never thought about it that way, and I don't have the I don't have the experience to be able to counter it. So I think it's important to maintain those muscles. You know, like argumentation, like your brain works a lot like your body. If you don't practice something enough, like it goes away. So if you don't practice defending why racism is bad or why we should care about the poor or stuff like that, well, when you're encountered with people who have a very vested interest and have a lot of practice attacking those ideas, you might not be able to stand up to scrutiny. And I truly believe that if you think your ideas are the best, and I do, I think my ideas are the best. That's why I have them. I think that if I researched enough, I could defend these ideas against anything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a matter of, can I prep enough? Because if in my prep I find out that I'm wrong, I probably shouldn't have that idea in the first place. So I think our ideas are good enough to stand up to scrutiny and to win, even when the other team shows up. Regarding the platforming question, I don't know if I buy it. I think that there is something to be said of, like, debating an issue legitimizes it, but I don't know if that's 100% accurate. Like, debating an issue legitimizes it. I don't know if it does, because in a lot of people's minds, it's already legitimate. So, for example, I'll use a personal experience. Are gay people immoral? So since I'm gay, I feel comfortable. I'm not throwing anyone else under the bus here. So it is, on one hand, it's very shitty to have this debate, especially to make a gay person engage in this debate, because they're debating their own existence. And there is no middle ground between these two positions. Someone either thinks you're bad or they think you're just neutral and fine. And a middle ground in there is still bad. So the only good outcome about this debate is if someone comes all the way to your side, not just halfway. So there's no middle ground that you want to meet with these people. And I do get the the fear there. The issue is that a lot of people are already not on your side. So do you want, like, I don't understand this notion that, well, we can't legitimize the position that gay people are bad. We can't legitimize that. Well, the trouble is, if you're an advocate, an LGBT advocate, that's who you're trying to reach. That is the exact audience you're trying to reach. And people who already think like that have already had that idea legitimized in their heads. That's the exact audience that you're trying to reach. You're not helping anybody by keeping the conversation away from them.
Do you think that it depends on the venue of the platform? I think one thing that I've seen a lot, especially specifically in UK political discourse, as people saying, so I can't remember who it was, maybe like Tommy Robinson going on Question Time, which is like, I don't know if you know it, but it's like, but they just have a bunch of politicians in like a little circle and they get asked questions from the audience. People said that was legitimizing, basically a massive racist, because it's, the BBC, it's an official TV network, and then it becomes almost part of the Overton window. Whereas when you're like an online sphere and it's more about, it is a debate culture, there's a difference between national TV and then trying to appeal specifically to someone else's audience on YouTube, for example.
Yeah, I think there's some legitimacy to that argument. Like, bringing on someone like Tommy Robinson on the BBC does introduce a lot of the public to, not only these ideas, because they're probably aware of these ideas, but, this guy's on actual TV now. These ideas must be worth considering. I think that's fair. So there's no hard right and wrong answers on all of these, but my answer to that would be, well, let's bring on someone who's exactly the opposite of Tommy Robinson on the other side, and because the risk is Tommy Robinson comes off looking reasonable and good and doesn't get the pushback. But what if you brought on Tommy Robinson and then brought on a really, really skilled rhetorician who is in complete opposition to him, and he just wipes the floor with Tommy Robinson? Now the conversation is not, well, Tommy Robinson was legitimized on a big platform. The conversation is now, Tommy Robinson was just destroyed on a large platform. So there's definitely risk in all of this. If you are doing the right debates, which is to say you're not just dunking on people everybody's going to laugh at, you're actually going up against people who are somewhat capable, you're going to lose a few. You are going to look worse to the audience than you will in others. That's a risk that you have to be willing to take if you want to be effective at this specific means of advocacy.
So in your online advocacy, what would you say has been your most memorable, or you feel like your most impactful moment in engaging with politics online? What has been the moment that really stands out when you look over your time in debate streams in YouTube?
I think it was the most impactful is just getting comments occasionally to say that, hey, thank you so much for this debate. Thank you so much for this video. It really helped me formulate my own thoughts, formulate my own opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a few videos that I'm really proud of regarding trans issues, where I do use a lot of scientific data, but also hopefully present it in a way that's at least entertaining and makes sense to people who maybe don't have a scientific background, and getting comments to say like, hey man, I'm really, really glad you made this. Like, this has helped me a lot. Like I did a video on the Lisa Littman rapid onset gender dysphoria study, something that like TERFs use a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a really in-depth video with a friend of mine who who helped me make a lot of it that was really, really personal to them. And getting that kind of feedback saying, thank you so much. I was scared of this paper. I was scared about what it might mean because I hadn't seen too many people showing what the paper said. I only heard the TERFs telling me what it said, but now I understand more. Now I feel better. Like that's by far the best thing that can happen, in my opinion, to the impact that I want to have.
Sure. So for those who don't know, TERF is trans exclusionary radical feminist. So someone who would identify themselves as a feminist, but then won't count transgender people. You recently published your amazing, what was it called? The TERF rebuttal super document. That's on your Twitter, and it will be the link in the description as well. So what is the TERF rebuttal super doc, and what has driven you to making such a comprehensive list of the scientific data around transgender issues?
Two things. One, so I have I have a lot of I follow a lot of trans people, and I am followed by a lot of trans people. I'm especially followed a lot by trans people who are engaging in these, who are doing the good work. They're engaging with, if we don't want to say TERFs, we can call them gender critical people, and engaging with the LGBT Alliance, and engaging with transphobes in general. They're putting in the work, and anytime that studies in science comes up, they say, hey. They'll tag me and say, hey, do you have a resource on this exact issue? Because, it's just a reputation that I've somehow gotten for myself, which I'm fine with. That's kind of awesome. Science Lad, exactly. So that combined with, I was approached by a few people to give like a counter response to Posey Parker. So Posey Parker is a pretty famous like gender critical exclusionary feminist who is really, really awful to trans people. She was giving a talk on this Discord server, and I was asked to come on before her to kind of like preemptively like show where she's wrong. And over the course of that, one of my friends gave me like, okay, so I'm involved in this space a ton. Here are like 11 primary points that I hear TERFs bring up all the time, and it was like these questions. So it was a combination of, I already had a ton of these studies. Well, why not just list them off in a Google Doc, give you a link to them via Sci-Hub, which is an amazing resource where you can get studies for free, and give a short description, and then organize them on their different topics. And also, towards the bottom of the document, the second half of the document, let's see if we can have sourced answers for a lot of these common talking points. Now, I wasn't able to get to all those talking points because a lot of them just didn't have a scientific answer, and kind of what we were saying earlier. That's my specialty is finding the research and empirical data, but sometimes that's not enough. So I did what I could in terms of the data. So this isn't a resource. This is a resource for people to get the data to make their own arguments, and it's just really nice just to have this out there, so that if someone wants to do their own research, hopefully it's organized well, and it's just going to make people more informed on these issues.
So why do you think that, I'm not sure if this is something that I've just experienced, but why do you think that trans issues are ones that seem to be quite almost, vehemently sort of rejected by a lot of people? Now, I talk to a lot of people, different sides of the political spectrum, and normally I can find some leniency, or like sort of, whether it's not, changing their opinions, but getting somewhat of a some pullback, I guess. Whereas I don't know if it's just my thing. Maybe I need to use the document more. Trans issues has been something that I've struggled with a little bit. Why do you think there is such a such a widespread lack of acceptance on trans issues?
It's a tough one. I would have to say that a lot of people are so I know this, ironically enough, from researching trans issues, one of the first identities that we have for ourselves is gender. So it is one of the first lenses through which we view the world. So we developed a gender, I'm going to call it a gender identity because that's what it is. We develop a gender identity, or at least a sense of gender, by the time we're 2 or 3. It's one of the first lenses through which we view the world, one of our first ways to classify people into 2 categories. So when we're babies, everybody's just an amorphous blob. But one of the first, lenses we get is, well, there's like a blue blob and a pink blob and those are our parents. to put it in very scientific terms. So it's really ingrained in a lot of people. And when someone goes against our preconceived conceptions of what those ought to be or what those typically are, it can just be a shock. I don't think it's healthy to say that, you know, someone is just evil if they don't understand something right away. I don't think that's helpful. And one of the reasons that I've got into trans issues so much is because, one, I care about people, but two, I have an ego, and trans issues are the easiest thing to be right about in terms of the scientific data. So if you do even a little bit of research on trans issues, it's so easy to be correct.
It all comes back around to dunking on people, you know.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Oh,
well, that doesn't. Well, if you've talked enough with TERFs, you'll realize that that's not enough. Like just showing that they're empirically wrong about something, that's not enough to convince them. So just the dunking doesn't work. It has to be. You have to go a step farther and actually reach out to them, which is challenging.
One thing that I've seen online when discussing trans issues, you know, even in leftist spaces, is people say, I guess you could sometimes describe them as like class reductionists, when they would say, oh, we shouldn't be focusing on trans issues as much as they do. They're over talked about or overrepresented in you know, leftist discourse. You know, even potentially going as far as to dub it as like a distraction. What would you say to someone who has this, I guess, quite a cavalier attitude towards these topics?
I'd say that is no one issue that everybody in the world cares about. You can try to make everything about class, but that's just not how people view the world. A lot of people have, you know, other lenses, for lack of a better word, through which they view the world that they might think is more important. There is a case to be made that one of the reasons that homophobia, racism, transphobia, all that stuff is bad is because it can negatively impact your material circumstances. So, like, you know, you're not getting hired for jobs, you're being rejected by, you know, society, which means you don't have less opportunities. So there is a case to be made that will ultimately would all come down to material circumstances, but that's not everything. You know, money is important, but it's only important. It's only important insofar as it helps us achieve happiness in life, or it helps us avoid things that may bring us harm. So class reductionism, I think you can reduce that even further. You can reduce class down to happiness, class as a means to achieve happiness. And for a lot of people, you know, getting rejected by half your family is a big blow to your happiness, regardless of your class. And so these things are not separable. I think so. There's my take. You can reduce class even further down to the real issue of human happiness, and in that view of things, class is only one part of it.
The way to solve class reduction is to reduce it further. To reduce it further. We have to keep reducing it.
Yes. Eventually, we'll get down to the point where, like, me want banana, me go eat banana. And that
go back to monkey.
Go back to monkey.
We need to go back to monkey. It's the only way to be happy. On the utilitarianism joke, I think it's a very common thing in left-wing circles, utilitarianism, and obviously I'm a fan. But there was a very funny thing where it was like the utilitarian presidential candidate, and they just go up and say, right, here's what I'm going to do. I am going to breed about 1 billion rats, and then we're going to have them constantly like dosed up with endorphins, dopamine, and all the good stuff, so that they are in a constant state of happiness. So we will build the purest utilitarian machine of a force for good of just 1 billion rats purely happy all the time. And frankly, I ever since then I've been convinced.
Well, how could you be if they were just these like fucking ecstatic rats just bouncing all over the place,
just having a great time,
being super happy, just vibing all over the place? How could you be sad?
Yeah, I mean, I took that example. I swapped out rats for Bulbasaurs, and you know, I would take out, I'd say, about half of humanity to make one Bulbasaur real. I think that's reasonable. Look at him.
That's good. Yeah, look at him.
Look at him.
Look
He's
at the pure
boy.
joy.
Look at his face. Oh God, I'm not proud to admit that when Animal Crossing first came out, the very first thing I did was unlock how to paint, and I painted that, and I put it on my wall, and I was very proud of myself.
Of course. That is the best use of your time. I'm not even being ironic right now.
I could have been doing all this amazing online advocacy, but instead I was drawing Bulbasaur, and honestly, I'm happier for it.
Yeah, it makes you a happier person. Hey, look at that.
Exactly. Once again, it comes full circle. Right then, Jangles, thank you so much for coming on. This has been amazing. I've all the links will be in the description. It's at just SJW Debates on Twitter, Jangles ScienceLad, SJW Debates on YouTube as well. I encourage everyone to go check out your channel. You're one of the best, I guess, up and coming left wing political content creators. The debates are amazing. I'd encourage everyone to go watch them. Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay. You can subscribe if you want. You can like if you want. That would be nice. That's my spiel. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.